You know, over the years, beloved children's books and stories have been adapted to film and TV time and again, for the big screen as well as the little screen. Some actually date back to the beginning of film. And one of these examples are these two books written by Lewis Carroll in the late 1800s, Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. These two books about a little British girl named Alice have been done so many times, both together and separately. And as a matter of fact, it seems like every generation has their own adaptations of these books. So today we're going to look at some of them. They all have their good points, and they also all have their bad points. Some come close to capturing the spirit of these books, while others are just completely off. Now, it's going to be impossible to review all of them, but let's take a look at what's available. The first version was made in England in 1903. Even though it shows its age and is not as dramatic as later versions, it is well worth a look. The movie is 9 minutes and features actors in large costumes. You have to be familiar with the story to understand what is going on. Although better versions came along, this gave the story a start. Most silent film adaptations are now lost. Other versions still in existence is the 1915 version. The film plays what I call the Wizard of Oz factor because right before she falls asleep, she sees what ends up becoming the characters in her dream. She sees a white rabbit on the trail and a cat in the tree, for example. The story is pretty much faithfully told, but it has some drawbacks. I don't think the story can be successfully told in the silent medium. The books are very verbal, and as a result, there are a lot of title cards that have a lot of poems in the book, like in the caterpillar scene. Also, because early films did not have great special effects, Alice does not shrink or get tall. For example, in the scene when Alice is in the White Rabbit's house, instead of accidentally growing, she gets his gloves and basically just gives it to him. While the version is interesting to watch, the sound versions did a much better job at telling the story. Speaking of sound versions, this is where we are heading next. It's the 1933 Hollywood version, which set a trend for later films. It was the first to feature an all-star cast. For example, Cary Grant plays the Mock Turtle in the film. The film opens not outside during the summer, but inside during winter. It also uses the Through the Looking Glass opening with Alice going through the mirror. There she meets the chess pieces, the White King and Queen, and the Red Queen. Then we get the Wonderland story told chronologically. After that, we get a rather awkward transition to the Looking Glass segments where the Griffin turns into the Red Queen. From there, Alice goes to Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and they tell her the Walrus and the Carpenter story with a cartoon from the Max Fleischer studio that also did the Popeye the Sailor cartoons. And then the story continues on until Alice is made queen, and then every character literally goes berserk at the end, and the film ends when Alice wakes up and realizes it was all a dream. This adaptation is probably my favorite because it remains faithful to the books and includes characters left out of other versions. However, it does have some problems. A lot of the costumes covered a lot of the actors' faces, and it's still up for debate if they were even in there. Is that really Cary Grant in the Mock Turtle costume, or an extra with a voiceover from Grant?
When we were little, we went to school in the sea.
As a result, the film did not do well when it was first released because people didn't know if their favorite stars were there or not.
Don't stand there staring at me as if I were an egg.
Also, the film runs for 76 minutes, and as a result, it crams the two books into one, and each scene seems to go by pretty fast. Another Alice was not tried again until 1948 when that version came out. It features Carol Marsh interacting with puppets as Wonderland characters. The film opens up in Victorian times with Lewis Carroll telling Alice and her sisters the story. These sequences, I think, are well shot and add a feeling of authenticity. This version, despite being very close to the book, is its own downfall. It's so faithful to the book that it's unengaging, and the characters seem like they're just copying the dialogue without any interest. The best scene, in my opinion, is the Mad Hatter scene.
Why is a raven like a writing desk?
That's a riddle.
I believe I can guess it.
While I thought this film was an interesting idea, I felt that it just didn't work. As a result, it has become a little bit neglected over the years. The 1972 version is next, and it was made in England with Fiona Fullerton in the lead, with a British all-star cast that included Michael Crawford, Peter Sellers, Dudley Moore, stage legends Ralph Richardson, and Flora Robson. This version I think is very faithful to the book, although Tweedledee and Tweedledum are thrown in from Through the Looking Glass, and the acting for the most part is very good. The set design is also a delight to the eye, but it does have some fallbacks as well. The movie has original songs written by James Bond songwriters Don Black and John Barry, which I don't think are very good.
I'm right all the time, so just refrain. Disobedience and its ingredients I just will not entertain.
And 2, I complained the 1933 version was fast, but this version has a slower pace. It seems that either the director or the editor didn't know when to cut a scene in order for the pacing to be much faster. This version might be liked by Lewis Carroll lovers and older children, but I don't think little kids will be able to sit through it. The 1985 version is one that a lot of people in my generation recall wonderfully. I didn't like this version when I was a kid, and when I rewatched it recently, I still hated it. The interesting thing is when I read many reviews from people where they recall that their parents taped it for them and they later taped it over, I'm not surprised. If I was a parent that had to put up with this version, I'd tape it over behind my kid's back myself. This version aired as a 2-part miniseries, with each episode being about 90 minutes, with Alice in Wonderland being part 1 and Through the Looking Glass as part 2. It was produced by disaster movie producer Irwin Allen, who also did the original Poseidon Adventure and The Towering Inferno. This version is not very faithful to the book, taking a lot of liberties and trying to teach kids a lesson about growing up. It opens with Alice asking her mom when she can have tea with the adults and replies when she is older. So now Alice starts on a journey from childhood to adulthood, with the characters teaching her lessons.
And you will never grow up, will you, Alice? Until you conquer the fears inside you, you will never be more than a child.
Like the previous versions, this film features an all-star cast of film, TV, and stage veterans who I guess must have been desperate for a paycheck to put on these costumes and do these horrible songs. The all-star cast features Sammy Davis Jr. as the Caterpillar, Anthony Newley, Roddy McDowell, Telly Savalas, Sid Caesar, Ringo Starr, Steve Allen, Pat, Carol Channing turning into a sheep, Ann Jillian, Jonathan Winters, Ernest Borgnine, Harvey Korman, Lloyd Bridges, Bo Bridges, and to top it all off, Steve Lawrence and Edie Gomez. One thing I did like about this version was it added a lot of scenes that are left out of other Alice's, like a scene where Alice is on a train. The songs are written by Steve Allen, and they are not very good, and I found them to be ultra happy. People that didn't grow up with this version are probably going to turn it off before finishing it or use it to cure their insomnia, but if you loved it as a kid, then good for you. Finally, the 1999 NBC version with Veronica Mars star Tina Majorino is next. This version does what the 1985 version did and tries to teach a lesson, but this time Alice is about to do a recital in front of a bunch of adults and she has to conquer her fears. So she heads into Wonderland, where she's given a few pointers.
So you like performing then?
No, I hate it.
Oh, you mustn't. It's such fun.
This version has a lot of special effects that other Alice films didn't have, but at the same time, they could be distracting from time to time. Thank goodness there are no original songs here, though. Again, Tweedledee and Tweedledum are borrowed from the second Alice book, as well as The White Knight. The all-star cast here includes Martin Short, Whoopi Goldberg, Ben Kingsley, George Wendt, Hagrid, or Robbie Coltrane, Gene Wilder, and Christopher Lloyd. This version was better than the 1985 version, but I felt that there were just too many special effects, but I thought it was a very good version to sit through. Alice has been adapted so many times with both positive and negative results. As a matter of fact, Tim Burton has recently announced that he's planning on making another version of these books. Will it be a very faithful adaptation, or will it end up being the 1985 version all over again? Only time will tell. I'm Rob Krantz, and that takes care of this edition of From the Vault.